friends, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing the Battle of the Books for 2024. So I realized I hadn't done this video yet for last year's reading. So I compiled all the books, came to like 105 or something like that. They don't even fit properly in this basket. But we're gonna do Battle of the Books. If you're new to my channel, I'm doing Battle of the Books every year where I put all the books from one year into a basket or whatever, and then I will pick two and then choose the one I liked more, and then the other one gets discarded. The winner gets put back in for round two, and then we continue in that vein until I get to like the last 4, 3, depends on how it all turns out, to see what my top books of that year were. I always like doing this. It's kind of fun, and because you're not given a ton of time to like really mull over it or like defend your answer or like, you know, say caveats or anything like that, it's really interesting to see which one comes out on top. So let's go ahead and start. The Tale of Three Trees by Angela Hunt versus the Agatha Christie short story collection. I'm going to go with the Agatha Christie short story collection. Then is Calor by J.J. Fisher and Princess Academy by Shannon Hale. I'm going to go with Calor. Next we have Crown of Secrets by Melanie Cellier and The Hollow by Agatha Christie. Probably, I really liked this Agatha Christie, but I also really liked this Melanie Cellier. So we'll go with Crown of Secrets, just because I feel like Agatha Christie will come up later again. Deadlock by Robert Leporullo and When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. Deadlock by Robert Leporullo. I know, controversial, right? The next one is Deadline by Randy Alcorn and Echo Island by Jared Wilson. Deadline by Randy Alcorn. The next two, Face of Betrayal by Liz Well and Chromatic by Ashley Bustamante. I really liked both of these actually. Oh, see, this is when it gets tough, when it's two that you really like or else two that you really don't like and you still have to pick one. When they're on an even playing field, it's really hard to pick one. I'm gonna go with Face of Betrayal. Let's go Ghosts by Alvin Schwartz and Dead Silence by Robin Carroll. Dead Silence. We've got Mermaid's Tale by L.E. Richmond and God Smuggler by Brother Andrew. Mermaid's Tale. We've got Mrs. Jeffries Takes the Cake by Emily Brightwell and Lone Wolf by Reka Clausen. Ooh, this is hard. I really like the Mrs. Jeffries series. I can't really distinguish which one is which one because it's all kind of one big story. And then Lone Wolf is, of course, the daughter of my friend Chantel Clausen. So we'll give this one to Reka and we'll go Lone Wolf. We've got The Prince Warriors by Priscilla Shire and Brentwood's Ward by Michelle Grief. Brentwood's Ward. Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe and Mortal Queens by Victoria McComb. Definitely Mortal Queens by Victoria McComb because Robinson Crusoe wasn't quite it for me. Lumen by J.J. Fisher and Mrs. Smith's Suspects. Mrs. Smith's Suspects by Ginny Alexander. I really liked Mrs. Smith's Suspects. I don't like that title. It's too much S's, but I'm gonna give it to Lumen. We've got Flight of the Raven by Morgan L. Bussey. Oh no! Versus Cry of the Raven by Morgan L. Bussey. That's not fair! Oh man, that's not fair at all. I think I'm gonna go Cry of the Raven, which is actually book 3 by Morgan L. Bussey. I really love that trilogy so much, which is why obviously I reread it in 2024. We've got The Weight of Air by Kimberly Duffy and The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. So we're gonna give it to Evelyn. We've got In His Eyes by, I don't know how to pronounce this name. It could be Stefania or Stephania. I don't know. Mickey. Versus Danger in the Shadows by D. Henderson. Upon reread for the umpteenth time, I didn't love Danger in the Shadows quite as much. I still enjoyed the ride. I still enjoyed the story. I just didn't super get the romance as much as I used to. And I really don't remember In His Eyes. I obviously remember the title or the cover, but I really don't remember it. So I might have to give it to Danger in the Shadows because the other one didn't stick with me. A Praying Life by Paul E. Miller versus Hattie Harmony by Elizabeth Olsen. I had to read Hattie Harmony by Elizabeth Olsen because she is obviously the younger sister of Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, also an actress in her own right. But Hattie Harmony was fine, but I'm going to go with A Praying Life because I loved it. The Christmas Doll by Elvira Woodruff versus The Sleuth of Blackfriars Lane by Michelle Greig. We've got Beneath the Forsaken City by Carla Laureano versus Something Wicked This Way Comes. Wow. I think I might go Ray Bradbury. Ooh. Oath of the Brotherhood, which is the first book in that series, versus Golden Braid by Melanie Dickerson. I'll go Oath of the Brotherhood on that one. We've got Deadfall by Robert Leporello and Deception by Randy Alcorn. That's too funny. It's funny because I read these series close together. All of the titles in their respective series start with D. And it's just funny because I kind of get them mixed up in my head sometimes. But I think I'm going to go with Okay, I know the story I want to win, so I just have to check Goodreads just to make sure I'm picking the right one. I know this is kind of cheating. It's not supposed to be how it goes, but I really want the right one to continue on, you know what I mean? I think it's Deadfall. Yeah, Deadfall by Robert Leporello. That's the one I want to win. Next, The Confident Woman by Joyce Meyer and Never Again Goodbye by Terry Blackstock. I don't remember Never Again Goodbye by Terry Blackstock. And I did like some of the things in The Confident Woman, but also some of them I had theological questions about. So maybe for that reason I'll say Never Again Goodbye. It's just a safer answer. Taliesin by Stephen Lawhead and The Big Four by Agatha Christie. Okay, Taliesin. So I always thought this was Taliesin or something, but it's actually Taliesin if you listen to the audiobook. So I always like to know when I'm saying like either a name right or a title right based on what the author says. So the next one is Wormwood Abbey by Christina Baker or The Painter's Daughter by Julie Clausen. I liked both of these. We'll go Wormwood Abbey. That one had a fantastical element to it, so we'll go with that one. The Wishing Jar by Penelope Stokes and Mrs. Jeffries Reveals Her Art. Again, I don't know, there's going to be a lot of Mrs. Jeffries in here and I don't know exactly what happened in which story. The Wishing Jar. I'm going to go with Mrs. Jeffries because I can't fully remember what happened in The Wishing Jar. The next one we have is Crooked House by Agatha Christie, which I loved, versus Grace by Max Lucado. Okay, I did like Grace by Max Lucado, but I didn't love it, so we're going to go with Crooked House by Agatha Christie. Next up, Mrs. Jeffries Stands Corrected. Oh, I think I remember that one. And, oh, Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman. I was going to give it to Mrs. Jeffries, but I loved Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman by Patricia Meredith, so we're going to go with that one. Invention of Hugo Cabaret by Brian Selznick versus Deadfall by Patricia Rushford. Invention of Hugo Cabaret. It was just a very unique reading experience, so. Newlywed Games versus Secrets, Lies, and Alibis by Patricia Rushford. I really like Secrets, Lies, and Alibis, and it probably would have won if I had picked a different opponent, but Newlywed Games has to win it. That was a contemporary romance, you guys, that I love. So what do we got here? 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You, super, super good, by Tony Reinke, versus The 13 and a Half Lives of Captain Blueberry, which is right here, by Walter Moores. So I really, really love both of these. And if I owned 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You, it would be on my favorite shelf. But I am going to go with The 13 and a Half Lives of Captain Blueberry. The next one we've got is The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell and The Girl from the Hidden Forest by Hannah Linder. Technically, The Most Dangerous Game is a short story. So while it was good and intriguing and stuff, and I would recommend it as a short story, because it's pit up against a full novel that I did enjoy, I think we'll have to go with the full novel. Next two, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi, and Cloak of Scarlet by Melanie Dickerson. Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, this one is so, so good, and I do own it, and it is on my favorite shelf. The next two are Hand of Fate by Liz Well, and A Long Obedience in the Same Direction by Eugene Peterson. I'm going to go with A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And Then There Were None by A.M. Huff, which is a And Then There Were None retelling, versus Z-Rex by Steve Cole. I didn't love that middle grade, so we're going to go with And Then There Were None. Murder in Postscript by Mary Winters versus Married Sex by Gary Thomas. Both really, really, really good. So different. I would probably reread both of them. I'll go with Murder in Postscript. Next we have Night Gardener by Jonathan Auxier. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Auger? I don't know. Mrs. Jeffries Rocks the Boat by Emily Brightwell. Mrs. Jeffries. Then we've got Priceless by the band King and Country, and Fatherless by James Dobson. Definitely Priceless. They're both less. Life is Hard, God is Good, Let's Dance. Brant Hansen versus Deadly Aim by Patricia Rushford. I'm actually going to go with Deadly Aim. I love Brant Hansen, and I will collect all of his books in my library at some point. That one just wasn't like his top tier. Against All Odds by Irene Hannon versus Mark of the Raven by Morgan L. Bussey. As you can tell, I love it. So Mark of the Raven wins that one. Mrs. Jeffries Takes the Stage versus Mrs. Jeffries Questions the Answer. I think we'll go with Questions the Answer. I feel like I maybe know a little bit of what that one was about. Of Love and Treason by Jamie Ogle versus Anna Burning by Shannon Hale. I don't really like Anna Burning, so we're going to go with Of Love and Treason, and I did like that one. Let's go with Finding Baby Holly by Holly Marie and Lady of Disguise by Melanie Dickerson. Let's go Finding Baby Holly. That was actually a nonfiction about a real life little girl who went missing and then was found. Lost Voices by Sarah Porter versus Bride of Blackfriars Lane by Michelle Grieb. Merlin by Stephen Lawhead versus The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This one's tough for me because I did appreciate a lot of things about The Last Murder at the End of the World. I thought it was well written. I just liked the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle better, but that isn't necessarily how you should look at a book. It's not like, oh, is it better than his previous work? It should just be, did you like it? So I did like it. And Merlin by Stephen Lawhead I really liked. So on merits alone, I might have to give it to Merlin. So Dominion by Randy Alcorn versus The Thief of Blackfriars Lane. Thief of Blackfriars Lane. Finding Lady Enderley by Joanna Davidson Politano versus Mrs. Jeffries and the Missing Alibi. Mrs. Jeffries. So This Is Love by Elizabeth Lim. That's a twisted tale. It's actually published by a Disney publishing house, where they take a classic Disney fairy tale and they twist the narrative somehow, supposed to be in an unexpected way. And Fantasties by George MacDonald. I wanted to love Fantasties a lot more than I did, so we'll give this one to So This Is Love. What do we have here? Chaos Grid by Lindsay Llewellyn and Heart of Ice by Liz Well. Okay, so I didn't love Chaos Grid. I know almost everyone else loved it. And it's unfortunate because Heart of Ice is from this Liz Well trilogy that I've already mentioned, the other two books. But Heart of Ice was the one I liked the least from the trilogy. So I'll go with Chaos Grid. Next one, Nightmare Virus by Nadine Brandes and Spell Slinger by Sebastian de Castell. Well, I was so disappointed by Nightmare Virus. So we're going to give it to Spell Slinger. Mark of the King by Jocelyn Green versus Resistance by J.L. Knight. J.L. Knight. Gotta win it. The Door Within by Wayne Thomas Batson versus Kiss by Ted Dekker. Okay, I didn't really care for either of these. At all. I don't actually even remember really either of them much. This seems like a throwaway. It could go either way, because I don't, it's whatever. I'll give it to Ted Dekker, I guess. I don't know. Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim and At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. I liked that one, and I did not like Six Crimson Cranes. Princess Bride by William Goldman versus Water's Break by Sophia Hansen. Princess Bride. And the last two, The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells versus Fairest of Heart by Karen Whittemire. Island of Dr. Moreau. Quick intermission. Now to put all of these in the bin for round two. Mix it up a bit. Make sure I didn't forget any. Round two. The Girl from the Hidden Forest versus Deadfall by Robert Leporello. Deadfall. Mark of the Raven versus Oath of the Brotherhood. No way! I used to have Oath of the Brotherhood on my favorite shelf, but definitely Mark of the Raven. I could read Mark of the Raven over and over and over, you guys. 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, also my favorite shelf behind me, versus Crown of Secrets, 7.5 Deaths. It's one of those things, your favorites just kind of always knock out the rest, I don't know. Taliesin versus Never Again Goodbye, Taliesin. Bride of Blackfriars Lane versus Murder and Postscript. Actually, Murder and Postscript. Mrs. Jeffries and the Missing Alibi, and Mrs. Jeffries Rocks the Boat. Don't really remember what happens in which one, so we'll give it to the Missing Alibi. Cry of the Raven versus, and then there were none. Cry of the Raven. Mrs. Jeffries Reveals Her Art, and Lumen by J.J. Fisher. Lumen. An Agatha Christie short story collection versus Kiss by Ted Dekker. Okay, I'll give it to the Agatha Christie short story collection. I'm so curious how far that one's gonna go. A Long Obedience in the Same Direction versus Invention of Hugo Cabret. A Long Obedience. That's Christian nonfiction, if you didn't know. A Praying Life, Christian nonfiction, versus Resistance. Oh, I love A Praying Life, but we're gonna give it to Resistance. The Island of Dr. Moreau versus Face of Betrayal by Liz Well. These really eerie and weird classics have a way of sticking with you. I don't know what it is about them, but I really did enjoy Face of Betrayal. I don't know why, but I want to give it to Island of Dr. Moreau. I cannot explain it. At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald versus Mortal Queens by Victoria McComb. Okay. I really liked At the Back of the North Wind, but I think Mortal Queens was a little bit better. They're very different, so it's hard to say one better, but Calore by J.J. Fisher versus So This Is Love by Elizabeth Lim. Calore. Princess Bride versus 13.5 Lives of Captain Bluebear. Okay, Captain Bluebear wins that one. Mermaid's Tale versus Crooked House. That's a hard one. I have Mermaid's Tale on my favorite shelf as well. I actually don't have any Agatha Christie on my favorite shelf. I don't really know why. I think just because I wanted to keep all the Agatha Christie together downstairs. And I guess for the reason that Agatha Christie does use language sometimes a lot, depends on the book, I'm gonna go with Mermaid's Tale. That one is Christian fantasy. Okay, we've got Merlin by Stephen Lawhead versus Deadline by Randy Alcorn. Merlin. We've got Dead Silence by Robin Carroll, and Mrs. Jeffries questions the answer. Mrs. Jeffries. Brentwood's Ward and Seeking Allah Finding Jesus. Seeking Allah Finding Jesus wins. Finding Baby Holly and Deadly Aim. Let's go with Deadly Aim. Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman versus Thief of Blackfriars Lane. Ooh. That's a hard one because I really like both of them, but I'm actually going to go with Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman. There is just something special about that book. Like, it's different. It's so different. Lone Wolf versus Wormwood Abbey. Wormwood Abbey. Priceless versus Newlywed Games. Newlywed Games. Spellslinger versus Deadlock. Oh no. I really like the story of Deadlock. It's a peculiar mystery, I would say. And then Spellslinger is just straight up fantasy. Like, high fantasy. Don't make me pick. I don't want to pick between these two. I have different reasons why I would pick one over the other. I'm gonna go with Spellslinger. Sleuth of Blackfriars Lane versus Chaos Grid. Sleuth of Blackfriars Lane. Danger in the Shadows versus Of Love and Treason. Of Love and Treason. And then the last one that doesn't have an opponent is Something Wicked This Way Comes. So we will put these back in the bin. For round 3. Alright. Ready? Wormwood Abbey versus Mark of the Raven. Mark of the Raven. Mrs. Jeffries and the Missing Alibi versus Lumen. Mrs. Jeffries? Murder and Postscript versus Deadly Aim. Murder and Postscript. What's happening? Death of a Christmas Tree Salesman versus Taliesin. No. No, I don't approve of this. Taliesin. Cry of the Raven versus Seeking Allah Finding Jesus. No. My memory card died, so hopefully I didn't miss too much. But I think I was comparing Agatha Christie short story collection and The Island of Dr. Moreau. And I think I'm going to go with Agatha Christie short story collection because the chance of me liking a lot of these is probably pretty good. And The Island of Dr. Moreau is so short on its own, so we're going to give it to the collection. The next two are Merlin and 13 and a Half Lives of Captain Bluebear. I'm going to give it to Captain Bluebear. The next two are Sleuth of Blackfriars Lane and Something Wicked This Way Comes. Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's going to be an interesting finale, I think. A Long Obedience in the Same Direction versus Spellslinger. I think I'm going to need to reread A Long Obedience in the Same Direction to fully get everything out of it. So for now, I'm going to give it to Spellslinger. Of Love and Treason by Jamie Ogle versus Newlywed Games by Mary Davis. This is an interesting one because they're both romance. One is historical, one's contemporary. Typically, you guys know, the historical would win, but in this specific scenario, Newlywed Games wins. And then the last one left is 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. So let's go ahead and put our remaining few into the basket and potentially our last round or second last round. We're gonna have Murder and Postscript versus Newlywed Games. Mark of the Raven versus the Agatha Christie short story collection, Mark of the Raven. Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus versus Mrs. Jeffries and the Missing Alibi, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. Something Wicked This Way Comes versus 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, Evelyn. Resistance versus Spellslinger. Interesting pairing, but Resistance wins. Mortal Queens versus 13.5 Lives of Captain Blue Hair. What do you do? They're so different. But I really like them both. I think Captain Blue Bear. Oh, guys. The last two are Kalor and Taliesin. Okay. Interesting. I think I'm going to go with Kalor. The last remaining... Oh, let's hit the basket. Okay, this is the final round. This is so strange. I don't know why. Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus versus Kalor. I just learned so much from Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. It was such an impactful journey that Nabil Qureshi went on. And Kalor was just such a good Christian fantasy. Just because I discard one does not mean I didn't like it. In this moment, this is how I'm going to decide. In this moment, if I only had those two books to reread right now, which one am I going to go with? Kalor. Okay, I guess that's the way you might have to make your decision. Resistance versus Newlywed Games. Resistance. 7.5 Deaths and 13.5 Lives. That's so funny. That's so funny. Okay, so, I mean, 7.5 Deaths will obviously win, but I'm just fascinated by the titles and how well they work as opposition. So, anyway, Evelyn Hardcastle wins. Versus Mark of the Raven. Okay, so my final four for 2024 were Kalor, Mark of the Raven, 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and Resistance. So, funnily enough, in 2024, 3 of these were rereads. Resistance was the only new read for me that year. I don't know what that's saying about a person's reading. Like, if they're only starting to enjoy the rereads and they're not really enjoying as many new stuff, what does that mean? Tell me what you think it means in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for joining me again for another book versus book battle. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work to write down all these titles. Ugh. But it was a lot of fun to do the battle. It's always a lot of fun. If you're interested in seeing the results from previous years, I have a whole playlist going back, I think, to 2019. Go ahead and watch those. It's a lot of fun just to see what happens when 2 random books are paired up against each other, which one wins. So, yeah, I really like these videos. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you also have a lovely day, and I will see you in whatever comes next. Bye!